Hello, my name's Anthony Wilson. I'm an astrologer and I've been doing astrology tweets for about 10 years. And recently I promised I would do YouTube videos as well, even though I'm a Capricorn with Cancer rising, so hopelessly awkward in these situations. But I've got my friend Janelle Belgrave to help me with the first one. So hopefully we can talk about the lunar eclipse tomorrow in Gemini, sorry, and also Sagittarius season with her because it's quite a lot of interest. Well, she's a Sagittarius, of course. So I'm curious, first of all, to know how she feels in Sagittarius season, because for me, I'm not feeling Sagittarius season like usual. How are you feeling, Janelle?
It's a tough Sag season because our ruler Jupiter is still in Capricorn, and he's just been banged up by Pluto, and I think he's about to be banged up by Saturn. So it's a little bit dry this season. It's not very festive, not yet, at least.
Yeah, Venus in Scorpio and Jupiter in Capricorn. They're kind of, with Jupiter's Sagittarius ruler in Capricorn, it perhaps is putting the dampeners on things a bit.
Well, it feels a little bit bleak. It feels a little bit Scrooge, a little bit Ebenezer. We're in the maybe the ghost of Christmas past right now, maybe regretting some things. And the ghost of Christmas present isn't too hot either. So maybe the future will look better once Jupiter moves into Aquarius next month.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a bit as well. The quite momentous transits at the end of December that follow this eclipse and the one on the 14th, the solar eclipse, which we won't really get into today so much, but we're definitely talking about the lunar eclipse in Gemini tomorrow. My feeling about this one is Gemini's full of surprises, the moon in Gemini. I always feel people with the moon in Gemini, they like to rationalize their emotions and not feel their emotions so much. They prefer a reason for an emotion.
Mm-hmm.
But when the full moon eclipse comes, it's like, well, actually now you have to face something, you have to deal with something. And I feel like it could spring a few surprises for some people, maybe things they've been neglecting or things that need attention, that the eclipse brings up stuff that you really need to face. So I also feel it's about information and learning because it's Gemini and Sag, opposite the sun, opposite the moon. So I feel like those signs and people with the sun, moon, or ascendant in those signs this could be an important lunar eclipse for them. Could be an important eclipse for them. It's in a pulse. It's not as strong as the solar eclipse in a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I feel like the mutable signs, Pisces and Virgo, could experience these weeks in a way as a beginning or ending, or at least an ending that makes way for a beginning. And eclipses traditionally have had this kind of heavy reputation or feeling. And it's not really a time to initiate around a full moon anyway, but especially around an eclipse. How would you see that?
A lot of times I think people think, oh, a lot of energy, so I should do a ritual or something like that. And I generally advise against that. It's just like this energy is too chaotic and wild, especially Gemini and Sagittarius. It's funny when you read the literature, when it's describing these kind of eclipses between these two signs, they note how wild the energy is because it's both fire and air. And so it's really instigating. People get easily upset and riled up, riots and fights and all sorts of disputes. And we're seeing that all over the place. So I think it's nice, probably the better idea to do something relaxing to calm our nervous systems, because I think a lot of us for the majority of 2020 have been under a lot of duress and stress. And as the holidays are approaching, it's kind of like the time that people start to break down a little bit. So it could be a nice time to unplug and maybe do some soul searching and just kind of reflect upon the story that has been 2020.
Yeah, and I really feel we're kind of closing a door now over the next few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first kind of actual closing part of it. And I feel that although there may be some revelations for some people at this full moon, for a lot of people, it's a time when things are beginning to sort of shut down a little bit. on one period and move into another, because when Jupiter and Saturn go into Aquarius at the end of December, this is quite an energy shift.
Yeah.
So this eclipse could bring stuff out that is a conclusion, if you like, of the last 12 months.
But I would even think about Mercury, which is Gemini's ruler, being in Scorpio, right? Like it's kind of like doubling up this idea of like you have to kind of face some really dark stuff that's not going to be pleasant, but it's real. And you know, here we are sitting in what seems to be a third wave of a pandemic, where lots of people are getting sick and, you know, unfortunately passing away. Like we are sitting in this very scorpionic, deep platonic, you know, in hell kind of energy. We're just like, will we get out?
Mm-hmm.
And we will, but right now you have to be in it.
I'm gonna pull up the eclipse here on Solar Fire. So we're looking at 2020, 30th of November. Whoops, that was the wrong one. So, yeah, as you say, Venus in Scorpio, Mercury in Scorpio here. Sun opposite the moon at 8 degrees of Sagittarius and Gemini. Austin Coppock's work on the decans that I really got into earlier this year, he talks about both those decans, the first 10 of Sagittarius and the first 10 of Gemini, being ruled by Jupiter and Mercury together. So this idea about ideas, information, and fast growth in Sagittarius being really important, and in Gemini, the versatility of Gemini and there being good at lots of different things very quickly. So I feel like there might be something to do with information at this eclipse, that we learn something. I mean, we're already well into it. I mean, an eclipse can be treated like the days before and the days after, you know, a period of 5 or 6 days really around it, I feel, but especially just before it, today and tomorrow, on Monday. So here we can also see Saturn coming towards the end of Capricorn, where it will move gradually out of Capricorn towards the end of this month. So what do you feel about Sagittarius season in terms of what we can learn at this time and how it's progressing?
Well, I'm not sure, to be honest. And I think it's because there is so much information kind of flooding right now. And, you know, some of it's from the past that's being brought up, you know, things that we have to wrap up and finish. So I think we're just sorting through the material. I don't think we're going to know what to do with it for a while. And it's funny because I was looking at the eclipse degree for the moon, especially at 8 Gemini. And usually, you know, there's this thing called Sabian symbols that you can look at what each degree in the zodiac can represent. And it's nice to look at because it can tell you a story about what could be coming in with the energy. And you might have something different, but for me, I have aroused strikers surround a factory. And the key words are demanding better rights and conditions, disruptions to the normal flow, not wanting to contribute or work, labor strikers, demonstrations, peace rallies, standing up for others, slave labor, and placards are waving. So I'm thinking that whatever happens, you know, the moon also represents the people in a chart in the mundane. So the people might be in a mood to strike whatever happens next. And for us over in the States, it's mostly like, you know, they're shutting off financial aid soon for those who've been out of work. The virus is spreading even more. And so there are a lot of things that would drive people to just quit and say, we're not going to do anything until we get some changes going on here.
Yeah, I mean, Sagittarius is traditionally to do with rights and legal stuff. Gemini is a sign that likes freedom. And I suppose with the eclipse moon, you get emotional freedom becomes an issue at this time as well. They both have I'm a Capricorn, so I'm very cynical about the signs. So I'm always sort of looking on the dark side, excuse me, but they always have a problem. They often have a problem with accountability, both Sagittarius and Gemini. They have a problem of being responsible for what they leave behind in the case of Sagittarius, and then in Gemini with actually telling the truth, actually not just coming out with words rather for the sake of it, rather than actually just laying things cold and factual. So as signs, they tend to be great for entertainment, journalism, writing, songwriting, rappers, so many Gemini rappers, of course, famous ones, or comedy. But what about in politics? Because they recently got a very bad reputation in politics, not just in the USA, but in the UK as well at the moment. That is Gemini. But what about Sagittarius? Are there any Sagittarius political or historical figures that you really admire?
The one that I've really been enjoying lately is Pope Francis, actually. He's a Sagittarius sun. And I like his chart because he actually is a moon and Venus in Aquarius. And so lately I've been feeling like his message has become a little bit more humanitarian. And I'm thinking that as we start to move into this more Aquarian energy moving forward, I think he's going to become a lot more prominent in that message.
Did he not say something about gay relationships recently?
I think he said something along the lines of, we shouldn't be shunning, our gay and lesbian, family members,
right?
Which is a massive deal for the Catholic Church.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So, and I think he said something recently about how aid was being distributed or something to that effect. I can't remember, something against Trump. I can't remember, but the fact that he's becoming a lot more vocal about just being kind to people seems to be the message. Like she should just be the basics.
It's strange that we don't associate religion with being kind to people sometimes, but yeah.
But he was actually born a couple of days after eclipse, actually, because he's born with the sun conjunct the North Node in the 6th house. So he really is here to be of service.
Right.
So I'm very curious to see how this is going to play out with him, being the Pope, essentially, and being like, no, we should be nice to each other and take care of your community members, and see how that plays out.
Okay. We were looking for people in the music world, or people in famous people that had charts that have significant placements around this degree. And one thing we found was Andre 3000. So I'm just going to share my screen again. So we don't have a birth time for Andre Benjamin, but his date of birth, his sun is 544 Sagittarius, Gemini. So that eclipse is pretty close to his sun, and he's been in the news recently.
Yeah, for minding his business, which is unusual for a Gemini, but he was actually minding his business.
I feel like he's incredibly polite for a Gemini. I mean, like all the other rappers, he just seems incredibly sort of, not causing any waves. I don't know what that is in his chart, because he has Mars in Aries. So maybe he just has so much self-confidence that he really doesn't need to really put it around like that. I don't know.
And then again, I don't know what he was like in his earlier career. Maybe when he was a younger man, maybe he was a little bit more aggressive. I don't remember. I wasn't really tracking his career like that.
I don't remember them that way in the 90s. No, I don't always remember them being like sort of friendly and cool and nice. And, but like you say, I'm not, there may have been stuff I missed.
Well, like you said, it can be that he's just confident. Andre at the same time is a Sun Pluto person. He has almost a perfect trine to Pluto in his chart. So this is someone, and then also a sextile to Mars. So it might just be that he is naturally at ease with
that's what I was thinking.
Power.
Yeah, that Mars in Aries sextile the Sun in Gemini. I mean, that's a lot of confidence, and he doesn't exude arrogance at all. So you'd say that that's kind of, that inward confidence is what gave him the talent, I suppose.
Possibly. I mean, he's also been having a nice Mars return that Mars sat on his Jupiter as well. So we don't know what he's been doing because he's not in the public eye as much, but I'm hoping it's a nice creative time for him. But basically he got into the news because a younger rapper decided that he felt like Andre wasn't welcoming enough towards working with him, apparently.
Younger rapper. Yeah, a young thug.
A youngin. Yes, a younger gentleman decided that, you know, he was not getting his due and decided that Andre was just whack and that Elton John was a better person for work. I don't know. It was weird. And, you know, I thought it was interesting because they're both being eclipsed, Andre especially with, you know, the sun being eclipsed at 5 degrees to 8 degrees. But it's kind of a story about, you know, depending on who you are, depending on how you've been living your life over the course of the last 18 years between eclipses, you know, your karma sets you up for whatever these events are, right? So imagine if Andre hasn't been this nice, generally polite person over the past 18 years. What if he was acting like Young Thug this entire time and was called out? The response would have been very different.
Right.
So I think that's a testament to him and his chart. He's also a sun on the South Node person. So he's supposed to be kind of a naturally sweet, kind, selfless person. He's not supposed to be here to self-aggrandize, honestly, with Sun conjunct the South Node. So it sounds like he's been living out his chart and he's being rewarded by seeing the community come up to him and be like, we got you. Like, we're not going to let anyone disrespect you.
Yeah, I mean, that response was predictable. I couldn't imagine what Young Thug was thinking when he got into that, but yeah. The one thing about his chart, Andre 3000's chart, that is interesting though, because there was a brilliant interview with him on a podcast recently with Rick Rubin, where they were sitting down, the producer, where they were sitting down, like talking really honestly together about the creative process, actually, amongst other things. And he was saying that it just doesn't come now. Like he was saying that, you know, it's hard. Well, not completely, but he's saying it's hard for things to come to him these days. You know, it's a different line, I suppose, when you. And he said when he was young, he gave a brilliant picture of sitting around when he was younger, creating raps and beats with his friends and just working together, and how they would help each other and correct each other and inspire each other to do better. It's a very, very good interview if anybody hasn't heard it. And I was thinking, well, maybe this full moon eclipse, right? It's going over his sun. Maybe this will give him some inspiration. Maybe this will maybe we might be hearing from him sooner than later. I don't know.
I think so. I think that would make sense, especially because his Neptune is involved. And we typically see Neptune quite a bit with actors and artists and musicians. So this might, like you said, activate something for him that can bring him back out of his hiatus.
I mean, also his Venus has had Saturn and Pluto opposite it for quite a while. I mean, Pluto for a long time, and Saturn for the last year or so intensely. So, I mean, that kind of helped. Anyway, that's quite interesting, that Venus-Saturn conjunction in Cancer. It's not what you wouldn't necessarily go for that as a musical career, looking at a chart like we don't have his ascendant, so we don't know. I mean, the ascendant you can see on this chart is for a 12 o'clock birth time. So the house positions are not correct on the chart, but obviously he takes his music seriously and always has. I mean, that would be Venus Saturn, right? That, you know, that would be the gravity that they always tried to, the Outcast always tried to give to their music. That would go with that, because they always seem to be a little bit deeper, a little bit more serious than some of the other acts out there in their prime.
Well, yeah, I would definitely say they would put a lot more creative effort in, you know, in terms of their videos and concepts. So I would think, you know, like you said, serious about their artwork, and especially what the emotional impact would be. You know, when you think about some of his most famous songs that he's associated with, you know, there's a lot of emotion attached to it. I think you automatically feel something, whether it's, you know, I'm Sorry, Miss Jackson, or, you know, Hey, you know, something automatically comes up. It's not just a song, it's like a full... Prototype
is one of my favorites.
Yeah, like you actually feel it.
mean, Prototype is a unique track in the hip hop world. I feel it has that, has a really strong soulful feel to it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I was looking at musical figures in the sign of Sagittarius, seeing as we're in Sagittarius season, which I always like to do, looking at the sun signs of artists. I always find the sun sign really interesting of a musical artist. And one thing that I think is quite a strong connection between them is not Sagittarian. The most famous ones that I've found, that it's almost like they don't care about their reputation, which builds their reputation. Like Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix, Frank Zappa in the rock world, and you got Frank Sinatra, Maurice White from Earth, Wind and Fire, Jay-Z. And Jay-Z always comes across as kind of, you know, authentic and straight up, kind of very saggy, you know, like the way he projects himself.
Mm-hmm.
Tina Turner, Sinead O'Connor, Billie Eilish. My favorite Sagittarian ever in the music world is Toots Hibbert from Toots and the Maytals, who sadly passed away in September. I really feel like he's as important as Bob Marley to me in the history of reggae. Like, I mean, he actually invented the word reggae. I mean, there's his song. He had a song where they think the word reggae actually came from one of the songs, and they got so many tunes. Toots and the Maytals. I don't really understand why they're not more famous but I feel this is a Sagittarius thing, is not to concentrate on reputation, but concentrate on direction, concentrate on kind of blazing your trail, you know. Like, you look at all those artists I just mentioned, it's like Jim Morrison of the Doors as well. I'm not a huge fan of the Doors, but he had this very Sagittarian energy, you know, of kind of, I mean, come on baby, light my fire, you know, going for this like I'm going to express myself and do it the way that I want. So there's a lot of people I found in that list that I just thought that their reputation was built on them just not really giving a damn. You know, this Frank Sinatra kind of, I just don't care, like, about that, you know. Or is that a front? What do you think as a Sagittarian?
It's probably a mix of both, maybe. I'd probably say it wasn't so much not caring, but not understanding what the commotion was all about. You know, because that's more like maybe a little bit more authentic living. It's just like, well, and not even planning a lot of those things, probably. And just seeing that people like it, like, oh, well, if you like that, I'll give you more because this is just what it is for me.
Right.
And so that might be what you're feeling, is that you don't care, or that don't care energy. It's more like, no, I just randomly did this thing and you happen to like it. Okay. Not making money from it. Great. Okay. Like, and that's about it.
Right.
I don't think there's a lot of thought behind it.
Excellent.
I think Sagittarius kind of fall into things and then they don't question it. They're like, all right, well, maybe this is the path that I'm on and I'll keep going on it until another path shows up.
And do you mind if we talk about your chart a little bit? Because it's a very interesting one, because you've got very strong Sagittarius representation in your chart. So Sun and Ascendant towards the end of the chart conjunct, towards the end of the sign, rather, conjunct. And then you have Mercury and Saturn conjunct at the beginning of Sagittarius. And that may be the part that you'll feel at the eclipse. I don't know, because of the lunar eclipse being on that degree.
Yeah, I think the lunar eclipse would be closest to my Mercury at 5 Sagittarius, but my Saturn's also at 3. So they kind of get clumped in together, more or less. I'm actually not sure, honestly. I will say that it has been a little bit more difficult lately to concentrate on things. And just kind of having to slow down mentally. It almost feels like there's too many cars racing at once. And you're just like, nothing makes sense after a while. So I think it feels like a lot of information overload. And just desperately needing to like turn off the brain for a bit, almost like a restart switch. So if other Sagittarians are feeling like that, that's possible. Also, I'm being eclipsed heavily as well. And with the South Node eclipses, typically people tend to feel a little bit more fatigued and tired because the energy is on the decline on the South Node. So, you know, just not having as much vim and vigor as I usually do to get things done. Like once the sun starts going down, that's it for me these days. So being okay with that, being okay with not having the energy right now, because just how the sky is looking it doesn't provide a lot of energy
Mm-hmm.
to begin with.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I have Venus and Mars in Sagittarius towards the end of the sign in conjunct my sun, actually, which is right at the beginning of Capricorn. So I imagine the solar eclipse and Sagittarius season in general that is not as it's not as negative for me as it often is for Capricorns. I feel, although it is in my sixth house, and you know, I had health problems when I was a kid. Mars in Sag in the sixth conjunct my sun, which had kind of stayed with me a bit through adult life. But like, it gives me a lot of energy, that Mars in Sagittarius and Venus in Sagittarius. As a Capricorn, it just makes me want to keep going with all my interests, even though I've tried to, you know, hold down regular jobs and not be a DJ like I used to be, an astrologer like I used to be. And now, you know, I found in the last 10 years, these things are growing again for me, you know, like really coming back. And that's the Sagittarian side of me, I think, you know, is that I can't stop. No matter what age I am, I can't stop trying to find those things that make me feel young, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's always important to think about the progression of the signs. Like, you know, we're coming out of Scorpio. We just faced some stuff, faced some demons. It's been really dark. And we come out into Sag, and it's like a breath of fresh air. You know, there's lights, there's people, there's things to see. You want to travel, you gain wisdom, like all these things are happening. And you're being guided by spirit, by soul, by something.
Right.
Something bigger than you, something that is guiding you and pushing you out into the world.
This is an underrated thing about Sagittarius, is that I've known quite a few Sagittarius that if they're not into spiritual stuff or mystical stuff, they tend to be into luck or superstition or something about guessing the future. I have friends who are good at gambling, or at least they seem to be. I don't know if they really are, but you know, like who are Sagittarians. Well, the fire principle of intuition, in the sense of guessing the future and reading the future. This is a side of Sagittarius that I think a lot of people don't see so easily, because Sagittarius is all about, it's all about travel, languages, enjoying yourself. You know, they don't really see that kind of spiritual side to it so much.
Well, it's also the sign of prophecy, right? When you're constantly looking into the future, you start seeing things, right? And also think about the people and the things that you're experiencing on your travels, the amount of wisdom and insight that you're gaining and interacting with people and reading and going to libraries and museums. Like all these things add up to something that allows you to perceive what is not visible to the natural eye, I guess you would say. Right? It's almost like that book, The Alchemist. I don't know if you ever read that.
Paulo Coelho.
Well, basically, it's like a series of events, a series of journeys that lead you back to where you're supposed to be. But it couldn't have happened without those series of events getting you there. So it's like that idea of the journey. Like you can't evolve and gain wisdom without that journey.
Yeah, I seem to have a lot of best friends with Sagittarius all through, but often with Pisces or Scorpio in there as well. Like that, and that's a really exciting combination, I think. I think it's not easy. It's not easy to have that. You know, I mean, you have a Pisces moon. Like it's not easy, that combination with Sun Sagittarius with a Pisces or Scorpio moon ascendant. That's the way. But those people always seem to exude this kind of like magnetism or you know, belief that's interesting, I think.
Well, yeah, it's not easy to feel that way and to have that belief, because you're living in a world that perceives things differently from you, right? Like Pisces and Sagittarius are both traditionally under the domain of Jupiter, right? And then Pisces is, in my opinion, even more vast than Sagittarius, because it covers areas that we can't see. It goes to the bottom of the sea, right? And so when you're always kind of aware of this idea that there's so many things that you can't see and don't know around you, what's the truth? What's real?
Yeah.
You know, what makes what you believe more real than what I believe?
Right.
And how do we know? And so I read this recently where the thing about Jupiterian types is always this question, well, how do you know if you don't know? What don't you know that you don't know? How do we know that we don't know we don't know? How will we find out? And it's always this question of how do we know? We don't know. There's something bigger than us that knows better. But how do we get those answers? We have to go find out.
Right. Yeah, that my head's spinning now. My Capricorn Mercury is like, I can't know, I can't.
And we usually fight about that, right? When you say no, and I was like, well, how do you know? And you're like, well, no, because this. Like, well, how do you know? Do you know? He's like, no, but facts say, but we don't know. Yeah. And so that's where we usually hit that impasse, right? Because to me, I'm like, we won't know until we know.
Right. Yeah. No, my Capricorn Mercury is very like, I mean, it's combust my sun. I think sometimes I detach. I find it hard to detach intellectual ideas from my own, personality, and it's like I'm not very objective. I have the moon in Cancer and Cancer rising. I belong to ideas. I don't. I think it's really important to recognize these things in yourself about your chart. It helps you become. It helps you to see that, well, the way you view it is not the way everybody else views it. But I take pride in that sometimes with my Capricorn Mercury. I'm quite sort of like this is what I think, and you're not going to disturb it, because I've seen, because I've taken a cynical angle at times in my life, in certain places I've lived and in certain environments, and I sometimes feel that to have taken that angle, I learnt more, by starting off from, well, it's a bit like what you were saying. It's like, well, do we really know this, and what is really true? Okay, well, that's great. You wanted to look at some charts as well. Let me just share the.
I would also say that I think Capricorn, even our friendship, has definitely given my Sag planets more boundaries,
Right.
Because for us, it's like, well, how can you not see it that way? And it's just like, no, like they don't see it that way because they're not seeing it through your chart. And so it's kind of also reminding us that, we have to contain ourselves in our own space, in our own bodies, we can't necessarily overflow and expect other people to take on our beliefs too, which can also be a problem for us.
Yeah, Sagittarius is the preacher. I mean, that's the kind of cliche Sag position, is to want everybody to jump on board with their ideas. But I mean, that moon in Pisces for you, means that there's such high sensitivity there, I think, as well, that you really care. And I think this comes over in the way that you express your ideas. So let me just go back to some more charts that we were looking at before. So you're very interested in the astrology of the royals. I'm not, but
I think that's awesome, because I think it's a great way to see how two people, one person who completely does not care about this family and probably absolutely despises everything that they represent, which would be you. And you're actually a UK native, which is good, because that's a wonderful perspective. And then there's me, who's an outsider, watching this from America. And our two perspectives, it's really cool because, from a Cancer nation that's all about the emotional drama to a Capricorn nation that's just like, no, it's just classism and everything else.
Yeah.
Be kind of fun to see.
Yeah, be careful about that, because the UK is a Capricorn. Yeah. The UK, it's very complicated, the history of the UK in terms of astrology, because England as a country is a very powerful thing, as separate to the UK. And there's absolutely no clear indication of England as a country and what chart to give it, because it goes, but it is believed it's an Aries, and I really believe that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's actually the opposite of this UK image of worldwide. Yeah. Of this kind of reserved, polite,
you kind of went around the world assaulting.
But all you need to do is spend a couple of weeks in Coventry, and you'll see what I mean. You know,
Pillaging, assaulting, stealing.
apologies to anyone in Coventry. I could have said 50 other cities from different parts of England, but like,
Mhm.
there's a rawness about English people, which is a good thing, like with our music scene and history, and a bad thing with the way that people quickly jump to conclusions and quickly put a forceful point of view forward. And anything that anything is response to anything is attack,
Hmm.
right? This is my feeling about England as a country, and I'm separating it from Scotland deliberately, Wales deliberately, because I do feel there's a different climate in those countries in the terms of the way people communicate. And I'm English, and I think there's a raw, very positive energy there that we left behind somewhere.
Well,
Um,
with Brexit coming, maybe you'll get a new chart.
let's not go into that. Right. So the royal family have a curious history. I do know this. They have a curious history of eclipses being really important in the historical the timeline of the family. So whose chart would you like me to pull out?
Well, I guess let's start with Prince Charles. Since he seems to be under a lot of duress right now. And this is because Netflix's The Crown came out with their season 4 recently this month. And season 4 starts out with the Thatcher years, as well as Princess Diana marrying into the family. And so it kind of covers those first early years. And they're kind of rehashing the horror that was that marriage. And just the pretty negative results of that marriage, which was essentially Princess Diana dying at a very young age, and everything else that happened, especially the fact that Prince Charles ended up marrying the woman that he was cheating with the entire time, Camilla Parker Bowles, right? So I was looking at his chart to see if he's being eclipsed, because right now, Clarence House, which is his, royal house, has closed down or turned off the comments on their social media because people were essentially trolling them because they saw this show and just like, yo, you're pretty much a terrible human being for treating your wife like this. And so I was wondering what was happening in this chart. And right away I saw that his Saturn was being eclipsed. He has Saturn at 5 Virgo. And that's about 3 degrees away from the Gemini Sag eclipses by square. And I include the squares when I look at eclipses because I think those planets do get pulled in, more or less, if they're close enough to the eclipse points. So we have his Saturn, and his Saturn rules over his 7th house of marriage, as well as his 6th house of service and work and things like that. So, we're re-scrutinizing his marriages, and also the work that he did within those marriages, because he worked with his partners. And then also his Jupiter and Mars and Sagittarius in the 5th house are not being eclipsed by this particular eclipse, but the next solar eclipse that we have on December 14th, we'll be clipping those two, because I believe that eclipse is at 24 Sagittarius. So it'll be falling right in between those planets, and is loosely opposed that Uranus and Gemini on the opposite side in the 11th house. And so I was thinking that all of this is just pulling in the drama of his past romances. And kind of rehashing this really kind of tragic story of how his romances led to the death of his wife, and how, they kind of over the past 20 years kind of cleaned up his image. And then here comes an eclipse to make it all kind of just erased all that hard work. So now I'm very curious what it's going to be like as his mother's getting older and he's about to ascend to the throne, supposedly, if his reception will be warm now that people are remembering how terribly he treated Diana. And then also this is re-escalated by the fact that people are looking at Meghan and Harry and seeing a lot of parallels between those two and what's happened back in the day with Diana and Charles.
So William is involved with some kind of complaint that the series is not reflecting the truth or something like this. I mean, could he do any more to promote the series itself, I wonder?
They're doing a lot. They're doing a lot to promote the series. Even the papers are talking about, and a prime minister, I believe, or one of the ministers of your government came out and was complaining about they should really say it's fictional.
I mean, if they wanted more people to watch it, that's the way to go. Like,
yeah, William was saying that they wanted to investigate Martin Bashir because supposedly when Diana did that interview back in the day, they had forged or faked checks to convince her into doing the interview by saying that one of her staff members that she had let go had been spying on her or had been being paid off by the press to basically report on her. So supposedly that was forged, but does it matter? Because I don't think it would have changed anything that she would have said in that interview, which is what the issue is.
Right. I mean, I can't tell you about any of these details. I'm looking at Prince Charles's chart. So there's so much fixed energy in here, and his mother's a Taurus. He has the moon in Taurus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth is a Taurus, right? I've got that right.
Yes.
So that's quite interesting. He does hang on. He does dig in, and he doesn't really ever change. He's always been like he is now. And the sun is very powerful there in the fourth house of family. So the fourth house position of the sun is always associated with wanting to brand yourself outside of your family while honoring your family. Like this is the traditional kind of reading of the fourth house sun, isn't it? So that's quite interesting. That one day, if he is ever king, which I don't know if that is ever going to happen. He would achieve that presumably, and that will be a big deal for him.
Well, we will see. There's a lot of really interesting transits coming up for him, especially when Jupiter and Saturn move into Aquarius and cross into his seventh house. They'll be squaring up to his moon, so that can mean a lot of things about his mother possibly, or even just the women in his life. So again, calling in that idea of like his romantic entanglements or his relationships with women are very public.
This is very, I mean, Venus conjunct Neptune in Libra, and Mars conjunct Jupiter in Sagittarius. It's no wonder he wasn't faithful. I'm sorry if that sounds a bit pejorative.
He's romantic. He,
yeah.
Loved the idea of love, all the letters and the phone calls, and this is someone who really wanted to be in love, but he just wasn't in love with his wife, and it caused a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So that's coming back up.
I was actually working as an astrologer in London in the 90s when they divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably the only time when I was ever really interested in what was happening in the royal family, because it was quite scandalous at the time, that whole issue.
I would love to track these charts, because I do think next year, going forward, it's going to be particularly tough for the family, I think. And I would love to see the chart of whatever was going on with 1992, as Queen Elizabeth had described that as her horrible year, essentially. And I'm wondering if that chart is coming back up, because there's a lot of issues happening in the family that could see the fall of this monarchy. Because Prince Andrew is also being eclipsed.
Well, yeah, okay. Anybody else you want to look at in the same?
I want to look at William really quick, and then maybe Harry. So okay. I know William, his Mercury is being exactly eclipsed because he has Mercury at 8 degrees of Gemini. And it's interesting because that Mercury is actually the ruler of his 7th house of relationships and marriage as well, and also his 10th house. And so he had come out with this whole inquest about BBC and Martin Bashir, but the response that people have been telling him is like, well, weren't you also hiding an affair last year?
Was he?
Yeah.
Oh, I just don't read enough stuff. Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so there was a whole thing last spring, I believe, where he was covering up an affair that he might have been having, and then he got his lawyers to make it seem as though it was a human rights violation for the press to report upon it. And then soon after that, there was a huge wave of abuse that started to head towards Meghan and Harry. Right. So it almost seemed as though there was a switch, and so it's like, divert your attention to these two. We're kind of going to throw them under the bus. Right. So I'm very curious what's going to happen with this Mercury. He's in a 3rd house perfection year, so he is dealing with Mercury's type issues, communicating, writing, dealing with the press and things of that nature. I don't think his 3rd house is too bad in his natal chart when I look at it. Saturn rules his 3rd house cusp next to Mars. Yeah, so maybe, I don't know, we'll see. It could be a combative year for him. He might open up a can of worms that he doesn't want to open.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Sun and Moon in Cancer. He isn't. I don't feel that he's bold enough to go forward with that.
Hmm.
I kind of feel with him sometime whenever he says something about anything that's political, as in this case, he's almost been pushed into saying it. You know,
Mm-hmm. Well,
I don't see that Mars and Saturn in Libra either as someone who wants to rock the boat. You know.
hmm yeah. And so we'll see how that plays out. But I don't think he's done because these eclipses are working on him as well. And then I think lastly is Harry, who literally put an ocean between himself and his family to get away from whatever was happening there.
Can't imagine why.
Can't imagine why, but he has Mercury at 5 Virgo and the Sun at 22 Virgo, as well as Uranus at 9 Sag. And he also has, yeah, so his chart is also being pretty heavily activated at this point by these eclipses. But I would think that Mercury and the Sun, Neptune and Uranus would be playing a part. But it's just a question of what will it be bringing out for him? Is the question. Maybe more work-related things, maybe more, I don't know, putting more of his activism out there into the world. He and his wife seem to be doing a lot in terms of activism with Black Lives Matter and, you know, voting and talking about miscarriage. So it seems like he himself, as a Virgo sun, has been pretty dedicated to service, to being of service. And I'm wondering how that's going to play out.
I always feel like if you're born into wealth, it's better to have earthy stuff than fiery stuff. That's just from my experience of knowing people born into wealth. Like, I mean, not to his level, obviously, but like it always seems to me that if you have a lot of fire stuff in your chart, I mean, I'm being very general here, but if fire signs dominate planetarily, then the need for experience and quests can sometimes, winning can be too easy for fire signs with wealth, you know. So those signs need a bit of a challenge. They need to be up against something, you know. Whereas with earth signs, they kind of get a bit of kick out of conservation. So it's interesting that he's the one that has actually been brave enough to step outside, despite the fact he has all this earth stuff. You know, it's Sun, Moon, Ascendant Capricorn. Well, looking at this chart of birth, is this person going to rock the boat? Yeah.
Secretly, behind the scenes, possibly.
Because of the 12th house, Sagittarius.
That 12th house is pretty active.
Right.
But also he's a 9th house Sun and Mercury, you know? So there is a part of him, and even Jupiter on the ascendant, even if it's in Capricorn, there is a Jupiterian element to his chart where he's kind of a man of the world, where he wants to be a part of the global community and not necessarily just stay in one place, probably in England. So, you know, I think he enjoys the travel and doing the work, but not necessarily the press, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you want to look at Megan's chart a bit as well?
Sure. Look at her.
Because I haven't really looked at hers. When I pulled it up, I was like, this is quite interesting. Cancer rising, so the moon is ruling in Libra, conjunct Saturn. Also Jupiter.
I mean, I knew that she would be fairly busy because she has this long Mars transit through her 10th house of career and profession. So she's been really pretty vocal, I would say, this year, despite stepping away. You know, she's been putting herself forward, doing Zoom calls and talking to young people and talking about her personal experiences. So it kind of very much mirrors this thing in her chart where she has the midheaven in Aries. And then this Aries midheaven is ruled by this Mars and Cancer in the first house. So a lot of her career is about her putting her personal experience out into the world. Her personal pain, her struggle.
Yeah, I mean, the Saturn and Pluto has been opposite this descendant, has been on a descendant all year. This can't have been easy, even in her relationship with Harry. It can't have been easy. I mean, in terms of the amount of stress that puts the ascendant under. But I was looking at her chart also, like Sun, Mercury, Sun, this Sun in Leo loves to shine, and then Mercury in Leo loves to be optimistic. I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look on the bright side, kind of thing. And then all this Libra stuff. Well, I'm a great negotiator. I can make anybody happy, And then she hits this stone wall, which is the royal family. I do feel there's a big disappointment there, like this was not the experience I was, obviously it wasn't, but I feel that there was I thought I could make a difference here, and we weren't able to do that.
Yeah, I could see that. But I also feel like she's kind of used to that too, because that fourth house, she's used to family issues. You know what I mean? Like both of them are coming into this, and I think that's why they kind of linked up so easily. They're both coming in with like family trauma and dramas to deal with, and so I'm sure this is kind of just a rehashing of what she might have experienced when she was younger with her own family. I'm nice, I'm sweet, I do all these things. I work so hard to be pleasant, and it's rejected. You know. And so it was really odd that they even pulled in her family to do this to her. They pulled in her dad and her sister and whatnot to kind of bully her.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the treatment in the press in Britain was, I mean, I would say it's shocking, but nothing shocks me from the Daily Mail and the Sun and those kinds of papers. I grew up seeing those papers. Nothing shocks me from them. And it's always black people in the public eye that are found fault with something. It happens in sport as well, where they will target the most famous black footballer and they'll find a problem with, oh, he's bought this car. It's like, yeah, he's bought a car. Like, what's the story here? And other footballers also bought cars. They just constantly hound. They know that their readership is racist, so they provide them with the fuel without ostensibly being racist. Well, without the story being ostensibly racist, they angle it, they frame it so their racist readership will gobble it up. And what the treatment she got was so obvious. It's quite astonishing that people can look at it and go, no, it's not about race.
Well, it's the gaslighting, right? And that's definitely something we could talk about with Neptune being so heavily featured in the skies recently. But still, we're unable to talk about how heavy it feels with Neptune kind of just making things messy and actually hypnotizing some people, right? Some people are living in a completely different reality from us right now. But that's because propaganda and, brainwashing, essentially. If you repeat something enough and lie to someone enough, eventually they'll start to believe what you're saying. So, it's nice that they are taking their experience of being attacked and whatnot to talk about cyberbullying and harassment and stalking and all of these things that we have to deal with. Also talking about how social media may have a negative impact on us because we're on it all the time. And, the things that we do online, we don't know what they're going to be doing to us in the long term. So it's cool that they've decided to kind of step away and do their own thing. And I hope that they'll be fine. And I think once these Capricorn planets move away from her seventh house and his stuff too, because they have the inverse ascendant descendant, that things will lighten up for them a little bit. Because imagine being a newlywed and this is what you have to experience.
Yeah. I mean, my sympathy is limited, I have to say. It's like, more marrying into that family, like what, I mean, I'm sorry, but I think if she'd asked black people in Britain what she'd be up against, I think they could have told her. And I do think sometimes Americans have this kind of, still this magical idea of the royal family, whereas in Britain, I think there's a lot of people, I mean, not the majority, but a lot of people that find it tiresome and find it, really quite painful, actually, to look at. And I'm definitely on that side of things. Okay. Well, you just see. There was one other chart I wanted to look at, which was Dion Warwick, because I've seen her on Twitter recently. I didn't realize she was on Twitter. And
Me neither.
she's turning 80, right? And she keeps popping up on Twitter with very positive and kind of funny little messages. And her music from the, she did all the Bacharach and David songs from the 60s, these really, really classic, smooth songs from the 60s. And I just found that she's on, there's a birth time for her. So this very, she has all this Scorpio and Taurus stuff going on here. And Venus in Scorpio is ruling, which is nice for people with Venus in Scorpio because it gets a bit of a bad rep. Like, and here's a musical icon with Venus in Scorpio and a great singer. And then the moon, Jupiter, Saturn, all in Taurus here. And she just represents everything. Her music and her personality seems to just represent this, like, this is fixed forever. This is what I represent. And it goes with any age. I mean, those songs, she didn't write those songs, but the way she sings them, the feeling of the songs, they just go across any era. And I just felt it quite nice that we should finish with a Sagittarius who has this very beautiful personality and very, very, very symbolic kind of energy, and open. Because I just started looking at her tweets, and she's a really nice. I don't know if she's actually. I'm assuming she's writing them herself, but yeah.
I think she is. It's funny because 80 is actually a 9th house year, so maybe she'll be tweeting a lot more in the coming year, where she'll be, using her platform to just disseminate a little bit of joy, It's interesting that she was also born under a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction herself. So
right.
maybe that's why she's coming back in.
Mm-hmm. And it's Jupiter and Saturn are going to be square. Her Jupiter Saturn next year in her 10th house. Okay. All right. Well, Janelle, it's been really a pleasure talking to you. And thank you so much for helping me with this, because I've been trying to do it on my own, and I'm really just too nervous and jumpy. So it was really nice for you to help me through the first one of these. Hopefully I'm going to be doing these every couple of weeks or so. And I would be very happy for you to join me anytime in the future with them if you do have the time. I know you're very, very busy. But happy Sagittarius season. Good luck.
Happy Sag season. It's okay. We can party. I would advise everyone, find something that makes you happy, right? Put on your carols, put on some lights, swirl around, be silly. It's been a really difficult year, and it's good to embrace joy and silliness with a time like this, because it's going to get us through the hard times.
Sure. Okay. I'll drink to that. And see you soon. Take care.
See you.
Bye.